Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the QT2 Systems podcast series on beginner triathlon. In this series, we're joined by veteran QT2 coaches, Eric Kahl and Jackie Miller. Collectively, Jackie and Eric have helped hundreds of people get to the starting line of the First Triathlon. Jackie and Eric will share their insights on everything a beginner should know before lining up for their first race. Over the next 5 weeks, so week 1, we already discussed race selection and getting your support network in place. And then we're going to move to equipment, training, final race prep, and race day. So we are here now for episode 2, and the focus is all about equipment. What do you need, what you don't need, how much you need to spend or not spend. So I'd like to welcome back Coach Jackie and Coach Eric. Welcome back.
Thanks, ma'am.
Thanks for coming back. So equipment. All right. So as Eric, I think, mentioned in the first episode, it's 3 sports, right? Swim and bike and run. So I'm going to hit each of them to start. So Eric, what do you need for the swim? What kind of equipment do you need?
Well, I'll start by saying that triathlon is not a cheap sport by any means, but it can be done a lot cheaper than people think. If we're thinking of just a swim, all you need is a swim membership somewhere that you can go swim safely. So a pool could be a community pool, could be a YMCA, it could be the gym. For us that live in Florida, it could be the Gulf or the Atlantic. And besides that, you need a set of goggles. That's your bare minimum. You need goggles.
How about a bathing suit?
Well, bathing suit is not optional anymore, is it? Yeah, a basic bathing suit and goggles. I mean, the ladies, I would possibly recommend the swim cap, but the bare minimum, that's what you need. And then we can add it up from there if you need your toys, your pull buoy and your paddles and your fins. And some people might need a snorkel if we're trying to work on technique and they can't breathe or turn their head to breathe just yet. And then a couple extra things, but the bare minimum: cap, bathing suit, and goggles.
All right. And then though, episode 1, we talked about the type of swim that you're going to see on race day, and a wetsuit. So do you need a wetsuit, or would you recommend that people purchase a wetsuit?
Well, I think it goes back to depending on what kind of race you're going to be doing, right? If the race you're doing is in cold water, you would likely need a wetsuit. You don't need to buy one right off the back. A lot of places will let you rent them, or you can borrow from a friend, at least until you know that this is what you want to do. Again, with any sport, you can do it a little bit on the lower cost, but once you start buying things, there's always something nicer, which is also more expensive. Especially in triathlon, everything is about speed and less weight, but that all comes with a bigger price tag. But yes, if you're going to be doing a swim that it's cold water, you may likely need a wetsuit, but you wouldn't train in it a lot if you're going to be training in the pool, which brings the point that you want to make sure that you swim in the wetsuit before race day, just because the way the wetsuits are designed, it's a little bit more restricted on your lungs. So some people actually have issues trying to breathe because it's just a little tighter fit and they have panic attacks.
Yeah. And wetsuits too, you can get sleeveless ones, which I always recommend for beginners, because I feel like the sleeveless ones, so there's sleeveless ones and there's full sleeved ones. Those are really the 2 types of triathlons. There's some people show up with the shorties, which don't have the legs, but that's not really something I'd ever.
Correct. I mean, again, that's likely something that they surfed or they borrow from a friend, right? Or scuba diving.
The wetsuits have, a couple benefits. So they have the buoyancy, which helps when people's legs drag, and it also keeps you warmer. That's really the primary reasons. But the ones that are the farmer's wetsuit without the sleeves, I feel like with those, you can really get away with a less expensive wetsuit more easily because you're not dealing with the shoulder restriction. Like once you get into the sleeved, I don't think you can buy a nice enough wetsuit, you know, from the shoulder,
Yes.
but you can come out, you know, like looking for maybe a model from a year before, or one tick that I have is like, get yourself onto the Facebook pages of your local triathlon groups, because there is always someone selling a wetsuit. Like,
Yes,
just
Yeah.
put
either
yourself
borrow
out there.
or get a used one off the
Yeah.
back. Yep.
Yeah,
Because the
yeah, and
chances
even,
are, if you're gonna stay in the sport, you're gonna upgrade anyways. So
right,
start on the cheaper side, because
yeah.
you know you're gonna upgrade.
Yeah, and that's where, like, even if you don't see him posted, get on there and be like, hey, I'm looking for a wetsuit, or I'm looking for a bike, or whatever. And it's amazing where people come, they're like, oh, I've got this wetsuit and I haven't used it in a few years. And so, you know, it's sometimes people, I've given away wetsuits to people too. So it's always, I think, worth asking. Um, and then there's some of this stuff though. Okay, so with the wetsuit though, getting it on and off, there's some kind of tricks with that. Like, what do you sprays and guys, I mean, what are some things that you like, Eric, from?
I'm the old fashioned, use a plastic bag, just slide my hands and arms through the wetsuit. You know, there are some products in the market like a PAM or something like that helps your body
Nice
slide
one.
through, yeah, body glide or a tri-glide, that helps you get in the wetsuit a little bit easier. If the wetsuit is properly sized for you, is not a very quick experience. I mean, these things, that especially the more expensive one, they're fairly delicate. So you kind of want to pull on them gently so you don't literally rip the wetsuit. And they fit a little bit tighter than other wetsuits. So, but sizing is very important.
Yeah, it should be tight. I mean, you shouldn't have a lot of room inside of your wetsuit.
Correct. Otherwise, the water gets in there and then you're not staying warm.
Yeah.
You know.
And one thing too, I mean, you mentioned people feeling the constriction through the chest, and I've definitely found that happens. So you don't want it so tight that you can't breathe, but also like some tightness on the neck. I found that putting some body glide like on the neckline helps a lot with that. But get it, practice it. Don't have have a wetsuit your first time when you show up to.
That's right. If they remember one thing from this whole series of episodes, is don't try anything new on race day. Period. Nothing. So you should have practiced everything before race day.
Yeah. Okay.
And for those that don't know, there's a difference between wetsuits you use for swimming versus scuba diving or snorkeling, diving, those things. So make sure you're getting a swim wetsuit and not somebody's old dive suit.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the second. So Jackie, I'm gonna talk to you about the bike, which is the most expensive part of it. So first place to look is your garage, right? If you already have one. First Triathlon, you can use anything. I've seen beach cruisers, right?
Yeah.
Hybrid bike, mountain bike. You know, it doesn't have to be something like really, really fancy.
It does not. It does not. And you can start with a used bike. I mean, I started with my neighbor's used bike, and I would highly recommend starting with a used bike if you don't have a bike, because you don't know if you're gonna, you don't know yet if you like it. So start with a used bike or a very low entry level bike, and then later, if you decide you like the sport, you can get into the upgrade or find yourself a new bike that you like. But again, like you said, Facebook Marketplace, your local bike shop sometimes sells used bikes on consignment, or sometimes they have bikes they're just trying to get rid of, and they're entry level bikes that you can maybe get at a pretty good price. But going back, same thing with sizing the wetsuits. Bikes come in different sizes, so you have to make sure that your bike fits you to how tall you are or your torso measurements, things like that. And then along with the bike, you may or may not need to adjust this, like get a new saddle if it's different saddles fit people differently. So that's very important to have a good saddle that's comfortable, and also have the bike, even though it might be the right size, you still need the bike fit to you, where the seat and the handlebars are certain places on the bike. And then from there, you need your helmet, that's mandatory, and then your pedals, your clips, and your shoes.
Okay, so let's talk about that, the pedals, clips, and shoes. You don't have to, right? I mean, you can
You do not have to.
you can go in sneakers if you want to. It's not the most effective down the road, but like for your first triathlon, you can certainly
Certainly.
just use sneakers and stay. It makes the transition times quicker. You're not
Yeah.
changing
Yeah.
shoes. So, but then there are, like, if you're new to clips, there are lots of different types out there. A lot of beginners like to start with the SPDs, which are the mountain bike clips, because they're easier to get in and out of. But that's definitely something to practice, know what you're getting yourself into, you know.
Yep. Yep.
I always feel like that they're safer once you know how to do them, but my first time riding in clips, I fell over 3 times attached to
Oh,
my.
yeah. We used to tell people it's not if, it's when.
Yes, yeah,
And we would take like, and highly recommend, when we did our beginners clinics, we would take people that had never clipped in before to grass and make them do circles in the grass and clip and unclip and clip and unclip. And that way, when they fall over, it's on a softer surface and not on the pavement.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and then once you figure out how to do it, it's second nature and you don't even think
Yep.
about it. But at the
Sure.
beginning, it definitely can be stressful.
Yeah.
So,
And it's also in the beginning, maybe a good idea to practice, you're just getting used to one foot, always using the same side. And that way, you know, like that's the foot I'm going to put on the ground. So I don't, because a lot of beginners will unclip on one side, but then think they can put the opposite side down on the ground. And then that's usually when the tip over happens, is they're trying to put the foot down on the ground that's still clipped to the pedal. So
yeah.
that's something to practice.
Cats come to visit. Okay, so maybe, Jack, you can talk a little bit about the types of bikes that are available. And
Mhm.
like when someone's going to look, like there's some really beautiful triathlon bikes. So if you showed up to your local Ironman, you would find like a lot of would you recommend that someone start with a triathlon bike or a road bike or mountain bike or hybrid? What do you think?
I mean, it's going to depend on your budget. And if you really truly think you're going to stay in the sport, um, try to set up with a different geometry to allow the legs to feel better to run off the bike. But road bikes are a little easier to handle. But you can also, if you found a road bike that fit into your budget more than a tri bike, you can get the clip-on. If you choose to use aero bars, you can get clip-on aero bars for a road bike. Yeah, mountain bike's going to be obviously your slowest option. But if it's something you already have, then that's certainly fine to start with. Or if your neighbor has one and you're going to borrow it, then by all means start with that. But if you have to actually go out and purchase a bike, I would stick with either the road or the tri, whatever one can fit into your budget.
Yeah, and it's funny because I used to, for years, I volunteered at the Iron Girl Triathlon. They had one here locally, and I'd see people who had been training in, you know, whatever other bike, and then they'd go and they would rent a bike on race day. Violates Eric's rule number 1, right? Never try anything new on race day, right? You're way better off if you've been spending the last 12 weeks riding the hybrid bike that you had in your garage. Don't rent a fancy tri bike on race day. It won't go well.
And it may not also be fit to your size.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then like how about, some of the other stuff, like you see people using deep dish carbon rims or disc wheels. Is that something you would recommend for someone new to the sport?
Not first off the bat, no. Especially a full disc. Right?
Yeah.
I mean that's something that you can decide on later if you really choose to stay in the sport. And I mean, it's like if you buy everything now, there's nothing to look forward to, right? So stick with the basics in the beginning, and later, if you really want to be competitive and spend some money, then you can look at different sizes of race wheels. But whatever the basic wheel is on your bike is good enough for your first sprint for sure.
Yeah.
You agree, Eric?
I agree. No, I agree. I was actually going to say, because I know, Jackie, how many years of racing did it take before you bought a disc wheel? Quite a
Oh,
few.
be long.
A long
Yeah,
time. So yeah,
a long time.
disc wheels are great, but the cost benefit is minimum. So it's hopefully you're fairly well invested into the sport before you commit to extra $3,000 just on wheels.
Yeah. I mean, as much as a good disc wheel, how nice it sounds, for like you are way better off focusing on getting yourself fit and getting ready.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Smart
Yes.
buying, and how about let's talk about the helmet and types of helmets a little bit. So I'll just stick with you, Jackie, since you're,
Okay.
we're talking the bike. So yeah.
So your helmet has to be, what is it, CFPC certified, I think. I don't know the exact 4 letters, but it has to be a certain certification. And helmets are mandatory at all races. And it's just for your own safety and protection. Even when you're training, you should always wear a helmet. It's silly and ridiculous to not wear a helmet when you're out riding a bike. Any little spill that your head hits the ground, you're going to want to have your head protected. For like basic bike helmets are great to start with. If you live in a hot area, you want to make sure the venting is good on the helmet, and you also want to make sure the helmet is lightweight. You don't want a big heavy helmet on top of your head. The newer helmets are very lightweight. Also, you want to replace your helmet every couple of years because the styrofoam inside does dry out. So I wouldn't recommend buying a used helmet because you don't know where the used helmet, if it's been in a crash, how old it is, if the styrofoam inside is dried out. So definitely, but that's one new thing you should always not buy used. Just make sure your helmet's new. Make sure it's fit. Also, helmets have sizes, so make sure it's the right size for your head. If you are unaware, go to the bike shop and have them measure what size helmet you would need. And then obviously there are race helmets with all sorts of shapes, sizes. There's the teardrop, there's the round with no vents. But in the end, you have to give yourself, like, if you're doing a longer race and it's super hot, sometimes the aero helmet doesn't even pay off for the heat factor because you can't get any airflow to your head and you're just going to be extra hot and your body temperature is going to go up. So that's one thing to consider as you get later down the line buying helmets as your equipment. But to start, I would just make sure it's light and well vented and new.
Yeah. And you talked about the importance of fit of a helmet. One other thing is the strap. Make sure it's buckled, number one. Okay.
Well, they won't let you out of transition if it's not buckled.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
They
On
should,
race
yeah.
day.
They should,
Yeah.
but it like amazes me when I see people out riding and the helmet's on their head. I'm like, but it's not buckled. I'm like, yeah, it's not going to do you any good if you
No. And then the loose,
and fit. Yeah, like not super.
Eric's pet peeve is when people's helmet straps are hanging down loose.
Yeah, I mean the
We'll go up
helmet,
and fix
it's
them.
probably the most important piece of equipment on the bike. I mean, when you
True.
ride, whether it's because you didn't clip onto your pedals or some unforeseen danger on the road, crashes are possible and the helmets will go a long way to saving your life out there. So
Yeah.
yeah. So now you have the bike. Eric, I'm going to turn to you on this. Staying on the bike, what are the kinds of things that you need to carry with you on the bike? If you have a flat tire, how do you learn? Like, I mean, you should learn how to change a flat. What kind of basic bike maintenance do you need to do? Tire pressure, like pumping up your tires. Maybe you can kind of hit those areas a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, everybody should have a little tire kit on their bike with them for sure, and they should know how to use it. It's another one of my pet peeves. If you don't have the equipment, if I stop and try to help somebody, but they don't even have the tube, the right tube with the levers, it's like, what are you doing out here, right? But no, it's basic. You want to have an extra tube, a CO2, the little adapter for the CO2 to pump up your tire. Again, it's not a matter of if you're going to get a flat tire, it's when you're going to get a flat tire. We've all had hundreds of flat tires. And just being comfortable changing them. A lot of the local bike shops will offer tire changing classes where you just bring your own bike and they'll show you how to take your wheel off and change your tube and put another tube back in. In addition to that on the bike, you definitely want to, I mean, if we're still talking about a sprint, you want to have some fluids, like a bottle that you can take a sip, even though if the sprint's only 10 miles, there's a good chance that you probably need to take a sip and drink something, which brings the point of being comfortable grabbing that bottle while you're riding a bike to take a swig. So that's something else that they should be practicing is, how to hold the handlebar with one hand and maybe grabbing the bottle with the other hand so they can drink. Some of the nicer bikes or the fancier bikes, they have the little bottles on the aero bars. But again, you want to be comfortable drinking out of that.
Mhm.
Last but not least would be some sort of a computer but I'm sure there's a whole episode just on Garmin and what kind of computers you should get. But you kind of want to have something that you could use it to gauge your effort or to see how far you've gone, or if you know that there's a turn, after 5 miles, to kind of gauge your speed and distance and even more important, maybe your heart rate.
Mhm. And how about like before you go for a ride, should you be pumping the tires up before?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Pump your tires before every ride, basically.
Yeah.
If you're gonna ride 2 days in a row, probably not a big deal, but if it's like 6 or 7 days in between rides, you definitely want to top up your tires. And every tire has their own little pressure uh, setting based on your weight in the wheel. So that's a little bit more specific to each bike, but definitely pump them up.
Yeah, the side of the tires will tell you sort of what the pressure is, but it's a good conversation with the bike shop when you buy a bike, like figuring
Yep.
out how much tire pressure to put in that. And that has changed over time. I mean, I went through a phase where I was racing where we were pumping our tires up to like 140 PSI. And now it's like, oh, now I'm riding like 90.
80.
I still ride higher than most people do, just because that's like my habit. I don't like it.
I
Like,
ride at 80 all the time on my tri bike, and
yeah,
people are like, I'm like, yeah, it feels comfortable. It's great. No
yeah.
flats.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
tires, they got really skinny for a while and now they're wider. So technology and preferences and stuff have changed over time. And but it's good conversation, but never over
Yeah.
put too much air in your tires because you don't want them to explode. Um, and then like lubing your chain, I think that's another thing people don't realize that's something that needs to be done, not maybe for every ride, but every few, or if it's rained, before that you want to make sure that you
Yeah.
do that.
Good bike maintenance is important.
Yeah, and taking the bike into the shop, at least once a year for the overall maintenance, because it's really
Absolutely.
not fun if you don't take care of your bike's not going to take care of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so the bike. And again, like you can get, Jackie mentioned a used bike. It's good you want a good mechanic. So having a relationship with a local store, that's probably the biggest benefit to buying a new bike in my mind, is because then you have that relationship right away from where you bought, but it's still good. Even if it's used, bring it into the shop, make sure that they're looking at it, because it might need to have the chain replaced right away, or cables are stretched or something like that. So if you are buying something new, I definitely take it straight into the shop and
Yes.
get it looked at.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So okay. So let's talk about the run now. And Eric, I'll stick with you for a little bit. So what kind of equipment do you need for a run?
You just need a good pair of sneakers. That's all you're doing. You're running. Some good socks and sneakers will be the bare minimum. Obviously, depending on the heat, you might need a visor or sunglasses or things like that on the weather. But for the run part of the triathlon, really, you just need to have good pair of sneakers. And again, if we're focusing on the sprint distance, I don't know that there's reasons to spend $300 or $400 on a pair of sneakers for a 5K, because your time difference is not going to be that much bigger. So sticking with your good old regular tennis shoes, I guess, or your sneakers would do just fine. So you can save some money on that. But again, if you once you get serious, you might invest on a little lighter shoe or something like that. But um, running shoes are running shoes. There's different brands and different widths and things like that. But again, just to oversimplify, I guess maybe for the sprint triathlon, you just need a good pair of well-fitted sneakers or running shoes.
Yeah, that's the easy one.
Yeah,
Most people have running shoes somewhere,
correct.
so at least you can start there. All right, so let's talk about some stuff that might overlap the sports. So, Jackie, tri kit, change in between. What do you think about that?
For sprint, you will not change. So you have to find a tri kit that you will be swimming, biking, and running in. Some people prefer shorter sleeves to here, and then some people prefer more of a tank or a race sleeve, which is sleeveless. The shorts will have a chamois in them, and a tri-short chamois is different from a bike short chamois because it's much thinner to not absorb all the water when you're swimming, and then the thinness to allow you to be able to run comfortably versus a big cycling pad. So again, you can buy them. I probably wouldn't want to buy a used tri kit, but you can. And or you can just, go online, go to your local bike shop and just get, an inexpensive version of a tri kit until you decide again if you're going to stay in the sport and want to go for a different brand or fabric. But you definitely want it lightweight. And then it's just your preference on the sleeves, and then to make sure it's a tri-fit short versus a cycling short.
Yeah, I mean, you can use like the cycling shorts if you wanted to for your rides when you're not doing the triathlon, although the
Correct.
bike will actually fit you a little differently. I mean,
Yes.
it's like I don't even like wear bike shorts at all anymore. Even when I ride, I've gotten so used to wearing the tri shorts now with time. But the first time you put on, like I was a cyclist before I was a triathlete, so putting on those like the tri shorts, I'm like, there's not very much there, but you get used to it.
Yeah.
Like,
Certainly.
yeah, and it's better than nothing for sure.
And you can use chamois cream too,
Yeah,
which may be one of your purchases.
yeah, that's a
Right.
good overall one. And then how about Eric kind of mentioned that you want a bike computer, but there's ways, I mean, to track. So lots of different smartwatches out there, right? If you've got an Apple Watch already, you can use that. That has like all of the features. And some people come into the sport, they already have an Apple Watch. And so that's you've got it. You don't necessarily, but otherwise, I mean, there's a lot of different brands out there, Garmin's or Coros, or there's other ones. Sunto, I think, makes tries. Fitbit, you can use, but just something that you're
Mhm.
able to, track
Yep.
activity. A lot of them have just the wrist heart rate monitors in there, which aren't maybe quite as accurate as the chest strap, but they're a good place to start, at the beginning. So much
Yeah,
more.
and I think, like you mentioned in the beginning, I think I would have an athlete focus on bringing what they have. So maybe the Apple Watch is the way to go, because you can wear that watch on the swim, the bike, and the run. So you're not fussing too much with things, or it could be a Garmin or whatever it is that they have. And as they progress within the sport, and then triathlon, there's a lot of bells and whistles that you can add to each one of the sports to hopefully make you a little faster. But if we're trying to keep it on the simple side, just a good wristwatch, even a wristwatch would do it per se.
Yeah, when I first started racing, it was a Timex. I did a lot of racing
Yeah,
with
I
a
had a
Timex.
Timex, I had a Casio, I had them.
I mean, and sometimes I would forget to turn it on, but I mean, at least if you can track like how far you're out there. And there's also like apps for your phone. I mean, you can do like Map
Mhm.
by Run or Ride with GPS or something where you can track routes, but you're not supposed to use phones in
Correct.
races. So that's kind of, and I think
Well,
that
unless you're using it as a computer on the
there's a
bike, and a lot
computer.
of people would just snap their phone on the bike, and then it's a hands-free device, but it's doing the tracking. Yes.
Right. So that's an option outside of watch. If you just wear a regular watch and you want something tracking, if you have a phone, an Android or an iPhone, that you can just pull up
Yep.
apps on there. And, in the pool, you can do the old fashioned way. When I first started swimming, we just used stopwatch. I mean, there were no watches and buttons or pushed anything. You've got the timers or still on deck that's, something that you can use. So you don't have to go crazy. You can spend $1,000 on a really super top end one. You can get some entry level ones for a couple $100 too, with time, or you can use what you have, but something to track is
I
helpful.
had an old Facebook memory picture pop up the other day, and I used to use rocks before the Garmin's were swim compatible, and I would have like rocks, and every 100 I would move one rock out of the pile to the other side, and so I
Oh,
knew
that's fun.
if I needed 500, okay, 5 rocks, okay, I did my 500.
Okay. That still works. I just would move the lane lines, like the
Yeah, yeah,
discs on the, lane dividers to count.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Those are good instead of going back and having to look at your watch and everything. I
yeah.
mean, now too, you can have the form goggles, which have everything in them, but it doesn't need to be that complicated.
No,
No.
no,
Yeah.
no.
So, okay. So what else? Let's talk a little, it's not equipment, but it's related to on nutrition or what, Eric, maybe you can hit this, like what should be in that bottle when you're riding your bike or running? What should you have with you for
You
nutrition?
know, if we are focusing still on the sprint, you know, you can get away with just plain water. If it's a hotter summer day in Florida, you probably want to have some electrolyte, whatever electrolyte brand you want to use, but you want to have some carbohydrate and electrolytes in the bottle, so you have enough fuel to get you through. In the sprint, you're probably looking at an hour to an hour and a half event. Maybe gels, a gel before the swim, or maybe one after the swim. That I think that alone this topic alone could be like 7 episodes, because different brands and different strategies and things like that. But just to keep it simple, you want to have some sort of hydration that you could take on the bike and or on the run. A lot of the races have an aid station on the run. But on the bike, you want to try to consume something so you're not totally dehydrated.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, practice, because
Practice.
some types of nutrition, there are so many different gels out there, and you have to find the one that works for you. There's like honey crispers, there's bars, there's lots of options. There's chomps or blocks or something, but the key is to try it, find
Yep.
something that works for you, and just make sure you're taking in at least some form of liquid, right? Because even, I mean, a sprint, you might be out there for 2 hours for a race, depending on the exact distances and what your speed is. So it's not nothing. It's not like it's 15 minutes. So you do need to be able to keep yourself hydrated
Absolutely.
while you're out there. So
So you can enjoy the entire race.
yeah, you want to get to the
Yeah.
finish line, right? So that's about treating your body well, taking in what you need. And we have on our YouTube channel a lot of stuff on nutrition, and to help you figure out how much you need, and what types are out there too. So lots of good resources available to you on that. So I think we're going to.
Definitely practice that before race day as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And that's the other thing, is like races. If you look on the race website when you're going, if they have nutrition on the course, they're going to tell you what kind it is. And a sprint race, as Eric mentioned, they're not going to have bottle tosses or anything during the bike, but they'll have it on the run, and they'll tell you if they have a sports drink or if it's just going to be water. And if they do have a sports drink, I like to have people practice with that. If they think that they're going to take it in, that they should get that and practice, because there are a couple nutritions that I don't, or race fueling hydrations that I don't particularly like. So I have to decide if I'm going to carry my own or if I'm going to use what's on a race. So it's important to know in advance with that.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, that was a lot of really good advice on what you need, and how you can get access to things that maybe don't break the bank and leave for the future. Lots of cool stuff to buy, because it is a fun
Yes.
sport to keep getting new stuff. So next episode, we're gonna talk about training. That's the thing. Okay, now we've talked about, you sign up for your race, you get all the equipment, you've got your sport network in place, but now you'll actually need to start training. So we're gonna hit that with episode 3.